Okay, I think we're gonna go with that topic today. Okay. Hey everybody, how you doing? Tekking and Berries here today. I think I'm just gonna say berries, plural, instead of doing the clone berry 001, because you know how it's going to go, right? Give it a few months and there's gonna be a Batman berry and a Green Lantern berry and a Pikachu berry, and it's just gonna be so many different berry variants. I'm just gonna say berry, plural. But today, right here, I have it written down. I totally don't have it written down. This is the smile from yesterday. But today we're gonna be talking about Higurashi Kurozumi's Devil Fruit, the ManeMane No Mi. Wait a second, I already did a video about the ManeMane No Mi. Well, I made a video about the ManeMane No Mi being wielded by Mr. 2 Bonclay, but I did not do a video about Higurashi using it, and she appeared for the first time in the last episode of the One Piece anime, episode 965, which is actually notable in and of itself, because episode 965 is actually adapted from chapter 965 of the manga. So it's like one of those things that doesn't happen very often, but like the moons align and everything syncs up perfectly. So the episode introduces Higurashi and Semimaru Kurozumi, although we do not get their names in the episode, but spoiler alert, their names are Higurashi and Semimaru. They both reference cicadas in some way. And that's also kind of topical because this year, in a couple of months, we got Brood X that's going to emerge from the depths of the ground. And I live in Pennsylvania, so those cicadas are going to be everywhere. I'm actually really excited for it because I don't really remember the last time they came out back in 2004. So, yeah, this Great Eastern Brood X, it's gonna be cool. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, look it up if you live anywhere in this region, because you're gonna hear about it pretty damn soon. Okay, so at any rate, yeah, they're named after cicadas, and of course, they're part of the Kurozumi clan, the same as Orochi. Now, what is exactly their direct relation to Orochi, we do not know. We just know they're part of the same family. Now, considering how upset Higurashi was when she brought up the story of Orochi's grandfather, she was like, you know, tears streaming down her face. You could argue she was just maybe hamming it up a little bit for Orochi because Orochi was kind of like a big part of her plans. So maybe she was being really, really dramatic, and you know, she's a priest and she has like that, I think it's called an Onusa, which is like a wooden Shinto wand that you'd use in like purification rituals and stuff in Japan. And so she's waving that thing around and she's like, "Oh, Orochi, poor Orochi, you should have been shogun, you!" So just imagine this from Orochi's perspective. He's like a kid at this point, and he's running around being chased by people that are trying to like execute him because he's related to the guy that tried to assassinate the daimyos like decades ago. And they're doing these Kurozumi hunts all over the freaking country, right? And so he wanders into this old like temple out in the middle of the woods, and it's all decrepit and falling apart. And then there's this old witch and this old man in there, and they're just being like, "You should have been shogun, you, Orochi! Oh, the tragedy that has befallen your family!" You know, they're being really over the top with this, but I'm going to assume that Higurashi and Semimaru were Orochi's grandfather's siblings. So that would have made Higurashi Orochi's grand aunt, I guess. I guess great aunt, but I think grand is like that same level of like grandfather, grandmother, grand aunt, grand uncle. I think that's not a term you use very often, but I think that is the correct term for that at whatever point. So if they are related to them in that way, you know, we never find out about it in the story, but I guess that doesn't really matter. What does matter is that Higurashi has a devil fruit power. Semimaru does as well, but we're not talking about that right now. Higurashi has the power of the ManeMane No Mi, which of course in the present timeline is wielded by Mr. 2 Bonclay. However, the way that Higurashi uses it in the episode is a little bit different from the way that we're used to seeing it be utilized by Bonclay, which leads me to believe that Higurashi might very well have awakened her ManeMane No Mi, okay? So we're just gonna get into that here. There's two examples of this, two things that she does differently with the fruit that Mr. 2 does not, okay? Or like limitations that seem to have been lifted. One of them is very blatantly obvious in the episode. The other one is, that's more up for debate, but there's one of them that's definitely different, okay? So, quick overview on how the ManeMane No Mi works explained by Mr. 2 when the Straw Hats first met him, first fished him out of the water, okay? He explained that using his right hand, he can touch somebody's face, and when he does that, it is permanently saved in like a memory bank inside of his brain. He explained it as like a save feature, okay? So he'll never forget a face that he's touched. And then using his right hand, he can cycle through the different faces and transform into that person whose face that he's touched. Not just their face, but their entire body from head to toe, okay? And that led to some very humorous moments with Sanji and Nami and, you know, everything like that during Alabasta, right? And so right hand transforms into people he's touched, and then he uses his left hand to transform back into his original swan self. Okay, that was the way Mr. 2 explained it. Now, the way that Higurashi uses it in the episode, it is very clearly shown she does not touch her face at all. Whether to transform into somebody else or to transform back into herself, her hands do not have to touch her face. Now, in the manga, this was also shown, like, Oda did not draw her touching her face in the manga, but I just assumed because, you know, you can't go frame by frame, like, every single second, I just assumed it was just implied that she had the power of the ManeMane No Mi, so she was just doing that in between frames. But in the anime, where things are more fluid and you can see everything, no, very well, she's sitting down in that creepy old shack and just like with her hands at her side and then transforming. Her entire body is just like blurring and then going into different bodies and then transforming back into herself without her ever touching her face, which honestly, I mean, let's just be straight up here, it's much better for your skin because, you know, your hands are going to have a bunch of oils and stuff, and if you keep touching your face like that, even to activate a devil fruit power, that might cause your skin to break out. You can get acne that way, you know, it's just not a practical devil fruit for healthy skin. You have to keep like washing your hands every time you transform. It would just be rough, okay? So that's the way Higurashi uses it, and I don't think it's an error on the anime's part or anything like that, like they just did it by accident, because like I said in the manga, you know, Oda does not draw her touching her face. So the only way it could make sense in that case, like it was an accident or it was an error, is if Oda himself forgot how Mr. 2's fruit worked. Okay, like he just forgot that, oh crap, yeah, that's right, you gotta touch their face to transform. No, I don't think it's anything like that, especially since, yes, we had Mr. 2 introduced at Alabasta, you know, where he was a character in that arc, and then, you know, several arcs later during Impel Down, he made another appearance, and Oda during Impel Down even had a brief little, like, here's how Mr. 2's ManeMane No Mi works again, like a reminder, okay? It seems like a pretty obvious thing. I know Oda has a lot of stuff to keep track of, but I don't think it's an error. You know, this would be like if he forgot how Bartolomeo's fruit worked, where you'd have to cross your fingers in order to activate the barrier, right? So I think Oda, I don't think it's a mistake on his part. I think it was intentional in the manga, and Oda might have even contacted the anime department and be like, just make sure when you animate this scene, make sure that she just transforms at will. She doesn't have to do like the touching her face with her hands in order to transform into other people or to transform back. She can just do it at will for a reason, okay? So that's likely that because she's awakened. I could see that being a pretty handy awakening of the ManeMane No Mi. It is a paramecia, and if we're going along with the logic that all paramecia awakenings are very different, or, you know, depending on what they do, like the ones that create elements, like the string's not an element. I keep saying string is an element in these when I talk about awakenings, but like, you know, you can produce string, so it would make sense that your awakening is turning everything into string around you. Same thing with Katakuri's mochi. But with an ability like the ManeMane No Mi, the awakening in that sense would make more sense for it to just be like, you know, removing the restrictions of like having to touch your face. Another restriction is that you can only transform into people whose face that you've touched with your right hand. That's according to Mr. 2. Now, this is the one that's a little bit more up in the air whether or not this restriction still applies to Higurashi, okay? Because Higurashi in this episode transforms into 4 people, okay? She transforms into a young woman who we do not know yet. She transforms into Orochi himself. She transforms into this person who we'll get to in a moment. I think everybody knows at this point who this is going to be, but we're just, hold on, I'll get to it. And then she transforms, actually no, 5. She transforms into Odin and Sukiyaki, okay? So the question remains, does the limitation of her having to actually touch someone still exist? Or can she just transform into people maybe that she's just seen? Maybe that other restriction is modified. So she still has to maybe physically see the person with her own eyes and then she can just transform into them? Or maybe not even seeing them with her own eyes. Maybe she can just look at a photo or something. There might be limitations with that, like depending on the quality of the photo, but that could be another pretty beneficial awakening power of the ManeMane No Mi. You can transform at will, and you can transform into anybody that you see with your eyes. You don't have to physically touch them, okay? I only bring this up because in the episode, I originally assumed, well, in the manga, it's not very clear, but in the anime, it's sort of, kind of, like in this one scene, it kind of looks like Higurashi is touching Orochi's nose because she's all frantic and everything, and she's just like, oh, the Kurozumi clan, oh! And she's like pointing at him, and so at this scene right here, that might have been the moment where she copied Orochi's face. okay, and then transformed into him just moments later to showcase her power, okay? So maybe with that. Then you could also say, how did she copy Odin's face? How did she copy Sukiyaki's face? Sukiyaki in particular, he's the freaking shogun of Wano at this point. You know, he's not just going to be walking in the street for you to, like, bump into him like, oh, sorry, shogun, I'm just a random old granny walking in the street and I just accidentally slapped you. You know how it goes. Oh, it's all right, old woman. Do you want some help? Oh, no, I'm fine. You know, and then she transforms into Odin, right? Or Sukiyaki in that case. But considering the fact that she can already transform into whoever, it would be really easy to do that, right? It would be really easy to copy the face of somebody in Wano and then get into the flower capital without anybody noticing who she was. And then she could touch somebody like a random servant or like a maid or something that works at the royal capital, works in the castle, and then she gets into the castle. And then, I don't know, she transforms into the person that gives Sukiyaki like his daily back rub or something and just like, okay, Shogun, I'm just gonna massage you. Oh, sorry, my hand... Okay, that was going a different direction. His face accidentally touched I accidentally touched your face. Sorry. You know, okay. And then boom, there you go. So that's how she gets the power to transform into the most powerful man in all of Wano. Plus Odin, who's like physically the most powerful man in all of Wano, right? So you could say that, sure, it's possible. Or you could say that because of the awakening, it's just she saw Odin and that was good enough to transform into him, or looked at a photograph of Odin. I guess they don't really have photographs in Wano because it's much more of a limited in terms of technology, and they didn't even have the snails back then. They didn't even have the little pond snails back during this time, because this flashback that we get of Orochi's past takes place over 40 years ago. This was like right before Orochi was working for Yasue, because right after this meeting with Semimaru and Higurashi, they're the ones that tell Orochi what he needs to do, and then he went to go work for Yasu. Okay, so when Odin's flashback starts, he slays the mountain god, and then he runs into Yasue, and then there's Orochi there. So this takes place a little bit before that, maybe a few months before Odin slayed the mountain god. So they wouldn't have those kind of technology. They didn't have the visual Den mushies or whatever. So it's either still being able to touch them, like through the way I just described, or she just has to see them with sight, and then that's good enough, okay? So, at any case, that's a little bit more debatable how that works, but she can definitely transform at will. Okay, and that's something that's way different from the way Mr. 2 does it, and I could see that as an awakening. Okay, now, as for the faces, as for the forms that she assumes during this episode, okay? So, in order to first showcase her power to Orochi, she transforms first into this beautiful young woman, okay? And I looked around and I couldn't really find anybody that this resembles, at least in Wano, but do not think that that's because she's irrelevant, like she's just some random woman from the flower capital that Higurashi copied. I mean, maybe it's possible, but knowing this is Oda we're talking about, I would not put it past him that in a few story arcs in the future, or maybe in like a flashback or something, we see this woman. Like, you could see that happening, right? Like, we're a few hundred chapters down the line and we're getting the backstory and the history of Goldie Roger and his journey, and then this woman shows up in the past, you know, like 30 years ago or something. Like, oh, that's the same woman that Higurashi transformed into. I'm on to you, Oda, okay? I'm not falling for this anymore, okay? This woman right here is going to be extraordinarily relevant in the future of One Piece. I already made the mistake with the whole Kaido fish duck thing, so here I'm just telling you right now, extraordinarily relevant character right here, and it's gonna be something involving the backstory of like Whitebeard or Roger or some shit. You just wait, okay? And so she transforms into that woman, and then after that she transforms into Orochi, and of course Orochi's like, what? You transform? I'm sorry, it's been a while since I did the Orochi voice. Oh my god, lady, you transformed into me? Regular Orochi? I am not a Lord Orochi yet, but I will be Lord Orochi someday, but right now I'm just regular Orochi. So anyway, yeah, transforms into Orochi, and then she transforms into this guy really briefly before assuming her original form. Okay, who is this dude? Well, I think it's pretty obvious that it's Wang Xi! No, it's Shiki the Golden Lion. Higurashi transformed into Shiki the Golden Lion. Okay, so That brings up a question or two. Okay, first off, I completely forgot about this. I mean, I didn't even remember this from the manga chapter. I had to go back and reread it. This line is there. I just missed it the first time, I guess. Higurashi mentions to Orochi that while the Kurozumi clan was being persecuted and everything in Wano, she was actually outside of the country. I think that also applies for Seimimaru as well. So they were outside of the country for a number of years. We do not know how long, and we do not know what they were doing outside the country. But then they came back in their old age, and then that's when they found out like they were being hunted by the Kurozumis, right? And they run into Orochi, and they have this master plan to give Orochi the Yamato no Orochi fruit and everything like that. Probably the location, that's probably where Higurashi got it. She was out traveling the seas, and she found the mythical zone Yamato no Orochi. And she hatched this plan. Okay. So, therefore, that makes sense. If she was out there in the world somewhere, not in isolated Wano, at some point, she ran into Shiki the Golden Lion and copied his face. Now, this is something interesting because 40-something years ago, and this would have been further back than this, back when she was still traveling, when she was still outside of Wano, Shiki was still a member of Rox's crew at that point, okay? Because 38 years ago is when they broke up at God Valley, but this is 40-plus years ago, okay? So Shiki was still a member of Rox's crew, which means Higurashi, either one of two options here. Either she ran into Rox's crew, managed to copy Shiki's face and get out alive. Maybe not just Shiki's face. Maybe she also copied Whitebeard's face. Maybe she copied Big Mom. Maybe she copied Wang Ji, and we just didn't see them. Or she was actually a member of Rox's crew. Because, I don't know, running the way that it's talked about with the Rox crew, running into them and managed to, like, you know, copy Shiki or copy somebody's face, like a really strong enemy on the Rox crew and then escape. Not impossible, but fairly difficult, I would imagine, to pull that off, right? But if you were an ally, if she was working for Rox on his crew, a lot more opportunities present itself there for her to, like, gain access to all these different appearances and stuff on Rox's crew, right? And so in the manga, I wasn't 100% sure it was Shiki. I was pretty sure because his eyebrows are very distinctive. He has these very, like, right-angled eyebrows or whatever. But in the anime, it's very clear he's blonde and he looks just like Shiki. He just looks like a younger Shiki. Because remember, the Shiki that we see in Strong World, that might not very well be the canon Shiki that we actually get in the story. Oda might not even do the whole thing with the steering wheel in his head. He might not even do that. He might draw him completely different. Who knows how it goes, right? But at any rate, yeah, he's much older there. Now, we don't know how old Shiki is in Strong World. I don't think that was ever explained. But probably in his late 60s, if not his 70s, you know, given the fact that he was on Rox's crew, and he was probably, like, roughly maybe the same age as Whitebeard, maybe a little younger. But Shiki was not mentioned to be an apprentice aboard Rox's crew the same way that Kaido was. It was made very clear that Kaido was younger than all the other big, you know, heavy hitters on Rox's ship. Shiki was probably roughly the same age as Big Mom, Whitebeard, and, you know, Wang Ji and Silver Axe and John and everybody. So probably late 60s, early 70s, around that range, okay? So 40-something years ago, he would have been in his 30s, if not younger. It depends on how far back she copied his face. But yeah, so I'm going to go with the fact that Higurashi was probably a member of Rox's crew. And that would make perfect sense if Rox is supposed to be this, like, symbol of, like, you know, more of the evil side of piracy. You know, sort of like, you know, the legacy that he left to the world is Blackbeard. Whether or not that means that Blackbeard and Zebek were actually related, like blood related. Or it just means that, you know, Blackbeard idolized and looked up to Rox. You know, it's like Luffy carries on the will of Shanks and Roger and their spirit of adventure, and Blackbeard certainly carries on the will of Rox to, like, take over the world, what Rox wanted to do, right? Be the king of the world. So they kind of stand for that kind of piracy. It would make sense that the Kurozumi clan, which is the most duplicitous clan in all of Wano, you know, Orochi's grandfather attempted to slay all the daimyos and everything, and of course all the messed up things Orochi has done in the last 20-something years of Wano, it would make sense that a Kurozumi would be represented on Rox's crew as well. And now, of course, obviously not everybody that was on Rox's ship was evil. Like, for example, Whitebeard, perfect example right there. And I refuse to believe believe that Wang Ji was completely evil. I think Wang Ji was a rather nice guy. We might run into him at some point, right? But yeah, Kurozumi on Rox's crew, I think that's fair. Also Shaki. Shaki was probably on Rox's crew as well, and Shaki kind of retired, and she's doing okay, right? Yeah, Shaki's doing all right. But yeah, she took the form of Shiki, so that's rather interesting. That's rather amusing there. And then, of course, she takes the form of Odin and Sukiyake to further the control over the entirety of Wano, right? Okay. So yeah, then there's Semimaru, which, okay, I'm gonna throw out a little bit of spoilers here for Semimaru's devil fruit in case you don't want to read, further in the manga. I've already spoiled that he has a devil fruit, but spoilers in case you haven't read to that point yet. So Semimaru, of course, has the barrier fruit, has Bartolomeo's fruit in the past, and he might be awakened too, but he still has to cross his fingers in order to activate the barrier, same as Bartolomeo. So, who knows? Like, if every Paramecia awakening is a little different, maybe some of the limitations like that still exist, but maybe, like, the range of the barriers increases, or the size or the shape that he can make the barriers out of is also better. If I'm just going along with the logic that, the older that you are, you can access Devil Fruit Awakenings easier because you've had it for longer. Every old person in One Piece has an awakened Devil Fruit. Confirmed. I mean, honestly, like, Whitebeard, yeah, he was pretty strong. Sengoku, yeah, you could definitely see Sengoku having the awakened Buddha. Suru with the wash fruit, yeah, you could see that too. So, don't throw that out into the ocean yet. That might be a thing. But at any rate, yeah, so Semimaru and Higurashi might very well have awakenings. I really think Higurashi has to have an awakening because it's either she's awakened and she can transform at will, or Oda just forgot how Bon Clay's Devil Fruit worked, which I refuse to believe that given how many times he's, like, refreshed it throughout the story and how it works and how he's usually good at taking notes like that. Pretty sure he wouldn't have forgotten. So, yeah, I'm gonna go with Higurashi being awakened. Well, anyway, that's the video. Let me know down below what you think about Higurashi's Devil Fruit power, how she copied Odin and Sukiyake's faces respectively, and maybe some other awakened powers that Semimaru could have had with the Barrier Fruit, and what's up with what's up with Shiki having what's up with Higurashi transforming into Shiki, and did Higurashi was she a crewmate aboard Rox's ship back in the day? And if that's the case, well, she's dead now. Kaido killed her, but she might have had the faces of Rox himself somewhere stored in the ManeMane. Wouldn't that be crazy? Oh, wouldn't that be a crazy awakening? You awaken the ManeMane no Mi, and not only do you get the ability to transform at will, but you also gain access to the complete back catalog of everybody's face that was copied before you got the fruit. So, like, if Bon Clay awakened his Devil Fruit in the current storyline, he would be able to transform into Shiki, or he would be able to transform into Orochi, even though he's never met them before. That would be an interesting one. I'm not sure how that would work because it seems to imply that the fruit just gives you a really good memory with the people that you take the forms from. You just remember them perfectly. Perfect photographic memory in that regard. That might have something to do with your memory rather than like the images or the forms stored in the fruit itself. Who knows? But anyway, thanks for watching the video, everyone. This will be Tekking and Berries, plural, signing out. See ya, everybody. Oh yeah, I don't have the devil fruit. I'm just slapping myself in the face for no reason. Bye.